The following podcast is not relating to my teachings and work at Del Cedar Medical Center and is for entertainment purposes only. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Life of Flow. And today I was super excited for this interview. It is James Sexton. James is a divorce lawyer and an author, and his book is If You're in My Office, It's Already Too Late. And we had a great conversation about something that, unfortunately, us surgeons and vascular surgeons and doctors have to confront in life, and that is divorce and difficulties in relationship. But we had a great kind of candid, funny conversation and lighthearted about it, and it was a good one. It was kind of one of my favorites so far. So hope you guys enjoy, and yeah,
let's do it. Two vascular surgeons walk into a bar and come out with a podcast. We are talking everything vascular and not. Welcome to the Life of Flow podcast.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Life of Flow. Today, I'm super excited. We have James Sexton, a divorce lawyer, author of an amazing book. And he's here today to talk about something that some of us, unfortunately, me included, are pretty familiar, which is divorce and marriage.
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that.
You got 100% batting average right here in the audience.
Exactly. So, James, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming and taking some time and spending time with us.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here. I was actually really happy to get the invite, and it's nice to sit down with fellow professionals and talk about stuff we all grapple with.
Yeah.
I want to say also, I think that James is our most famous thus far.
Yeah. We're scaling up.
Yeah.
The
you just did
ladder.
the Lex Friedman podcast. So
I just did Lex Friedman. Yep. I've done some big ones. I have some even bigger ones coming up. And,
that is awesome.
No spoilers.
It's very weird. It caught fire about 4 or 5 months ago. I wrote my book in 2019, and I did a lot of media from then on. And it picked up pace. I did Access Hollywood. I became a regular correspondent for them. I had a regular segment on the Steve Harvey Show. But, like you, I have a demanding career, and this was like a side project. It was sort of a way to use a different muscle and to engage in conversations that I thought were interesting conversations. There's a lot of parallels really between, what we're both doing here. And, when I did that Soft White Underbelly interview, for Mark Liotta, and I always liked that channel. It's an interesting channel where, if you're not familiar with it, he just talks to people on sort of the outskirts of society, people that don't get a lot of media attention necessarily, people with, substance use issues, homelessness, those kinds of things. And he really gets into these deep interviews with them where he talks about, what's going on in their lives. And it's interesting for our respective professions because, we're constantly dealing with people, but we're dealing with people in a very specific way. You're addressing, their vascular surgical issues that need to be addressed, and I'm addressing the legal issues that they're facing. But, a lot of times when you hear people's backstories, it gives you so much more depth of understanding of this person and so much more empathy for what they've gone through. So I got a call from Mark, and I did his interview, and, I just sat there and talked for an hour and a half, and I thought, well, I don't know if this is going to be interesting to anybody. And he'd sent me a text a few hours later saying, oh my God, I've done thousands of interviews and this was one of the best ones I've ever had. This is going to get 4 million views. Just watch.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, you say that to all the boys. I bet. And sure enough, it went up and it had 1.5 million hits within a week. And now it's up to almost, I think, 5 million views. And that opened the doors to a lot of bigger platforms. And when I did Lex, that of course was huge as well. And I have some even bigger ones coming up. But this is actually a conversation I was really excited to have because I've not had occasion really to talk to. I like to talk to people who are living lives different than my own, dealing with stresses different than my own. And then I think there's a tremendous amount of commonality to be found in terms of the overlap of the things we're all dealing with. And I think in such an increasingly fractured world as we live in right now, I actually think that's the only way the dial's ever going to move forward is for all of us to realize how much we all have in common. So I'm happy to be here. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. We're very humbled. The followers here are, in the cardiovascular medicine business. We've got probably about half and half, meaning physicians. And then we've gotten a lot of people in the business of like device representatives or salespeople or territory managers. And it seems like we're all kind of like in that sort of mix. And I'd like to kind of say, what do you think about this particular niche? Again, we're very appreciative you elected to be here, but what is it about us physicians that potentially makes us a little bit different and I believe statistically higher risk to get in trouble with our relationships?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right? Like that's the key question for you and for the people who are, your audience. And I think there's a lot there to unpack. So the first thing is I think physicians in general and surgeons specifically have a skill set automatically that you would think will make them better at marriage or monogamy or long-term relationships. And that is, in order to be a physician in general, and certainly in order to be a surgeon, you have to be good at delayed gratification. Like I have a couple of friends who are surgeons, one of whom is a vascular surgeon who I trained Brazilian jiu-jitsu with, which by the way, I'm always astounded that a successful vascular surgeon is training Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I said to him, I'm like, your hands are constantly getting mauled in jiu-jitsu. How are you doing this? Like if I get fingers broken, no one's going to care if their divorce lawyer has broken fingers, but a vascular surgeon, you might need these things. But nevertheless, he still loves it. Josh Bearheim, amazing guy, Valley Hospital, Ridgewood, New Jersey. But, look, I think physicians and surgeons in general are used to trading what they want now for what they want most. I mean, no one would spend their entire 20s and even into their 30s doing the rigorous work necessary to become a physician or a surgeon who wasn't able to, say, hey, my eyes are on the prize. I know what I want, and I want to trade what I want right now, the gratification I want immediately, for what I want most. And that should translate actually into marriage being successful, because marriage is very often about keeping your eye on the ball, remembering the plot of the story you're trying to write with your partner, not being distracted by the shiny object, the compelling other person, and saying, no, I want what I have. I want to stay with what I have. I'm going to be disciplined in my approach to things. And in fact, surgeons have a lower overall divorce rate average, 33%, among physicians. So as physicians go, physicians have a higher divorce rate, as do lawyers, than the general public. But among physicians, the highest rate of divorce is psychiatrists, and among the lower is surgeons at 33%. But one of the things so that's what we have going for us in theory, right? You have going for you in theory that you can delay gratification, you keep your eyes on the prize. But I would also, by the way, very often people are marrying later when they're physicians or surgeons because they want to wait until they're finished with their education or finished with their residency before they marry. Although that's not always the case. And the older people are when they marry, statistically, the less likely they are to divorce, although it's not a giant statistical difference. So what works against them, of course, is these are high-stress professions, high-demand professions. These are professions where you're not able to just say, okay, I'm unplugging now. It's like I'm unplugging mostly now, except for an emergency, right? And you have a duty to someone other than your family. You have a duty to the people who have entrusted their care to you. I mean, legally even, you have a duty of care, which is something the general public does not have. When you're a physician, a surgeon, you have a duty of care. So, that I think certainly puts a tremendous weight on people. In my experience, and I've represented a lot of physicians and a lot of surgeons, because I work in Manhattan, so there's a tremendous, huge medical community and some amazing institutions in Manhattan and that surrounding area. So I've represented some really elite surgeons, world-class surgeons, people travel from all over the world to be with. Memorial Sloan Kettering, for example, is a hospital where I've represented a number of the physicians and surgeons there. And these are people who, people will, they have people from all over the world following them around as residents. They have people traveling from the UAE to receive care from them. And I think that's a situation where, there are tremendous demands placed on a person intellectually, emotionally, and time-wise that is potentially antagonistic to a marriage. And surgeons and physicians, in my experience, fall into one of two tranches. They either marry someone they went to school with, right? Like a lot of physicians marry people they met in medical school, and they marry fellow physicians, or they marry someone who they met during residency or in their early work life, and so they marry another physician. Or they fall into the category of they marry someone who is completely detached from that world, and it's sort of that barefoot in the park thing. You've got the surgeon married to the yoga teacher, and sometimes that really works because there's a polarity, a wonderful polarity there. You have someone with a high stress job who's married to someone with a lower stress job, and the physician or surgeon, who is an organized, methodical, thoughtful, planning oriented person is a good offset for the person who's sort of hippy dippy and perhaps more chill. And then they kind of lighten up the physician or surgeon. So that sometimes is a wonderful balance. But again, sometimes the things that attract us to people are the things that eventually cause us to be repelled from that person, because it's charming when you're first dating someone or first married to someone that it's like, oh, this person's so lighthearted and they kind of pull me out of my own zone. And then after you're married to them for 3 or 4 years, you're like, oh my God, get your act together. Like we have to have an organized life here. And it's no longer cute, And by the way, in their defense, in defense of the spouses or former spouses, they think it's incredible. Well, I'm married to this person who has this very high stress, high powered job, and people are, deferring to them, and they're getting emergency calls, and they're like a superhero to people, and that's really amazing and charming and very cool to tell their friends. But after you've been married to somebody for 5-6 years, and your phone's ringing at 2 a.m. and they're like, yeah, I got to get back to the hospital. Or I got to. That gets old fast,
Yes,
and then I think it's very hard when you are that person, right? When you're the physician or the surgeon or the trial lawyer, and this is a commonality we have in our respective professions, where when the person says, oh, really, again, you got to cancel plans because you got this emergency at work to deal with, of course they have a point, right? They have a point. They want your time. They love you. They want to be with you, that's a beautiful, lovely, wonderful thing. But as a human being, I can tell you when that's happened to me. My response to that is, okay, I'm as advertised. You knew I do this for a living. You used to think it was charming that I was Superman to so many people. And now you're upset about it. And by the way, I don't notice you not using the credit card. This is something I'm doing not for fun, but for pay. So, there is this feeling of everybody's right. You know what I mean? But you can be right or you can be happy, So I think a lot of what I try to do in my work is create a kind of radical empathy to the extent that I can, right, for people. Because I think we all have a point and we all have a right to feel the way we feel. And by the way, even if we don't have a right to feel the way we feel the way we feel, right? You can apologize for your feelings, but you feel the way you feel. So we have to deal with the reality of our feelings, what someone else feels and what we feel, whether it's fair or not, it's how we feel. So I think for physicians and surgeons who, again, by definition, they're a lot like the quant people that I represent in finance in the city. They're mathematically minded, they're scientifically minded. Surgeons in particular are a weird, I love you guys, but you're weird. Because you're a blend of an artist and a craftsperson. The hands of an artist or a sculptor or a painter, really, in terms of dexterity and precision and having to do and practice things tens of thousands of times, combined with a mathematical and science mind, which is not something you see all the time in one person. So in all genius, there's madness, and I think that when it works, it works wonderfully. When someone loves that madness of you and loves that advertised, who you are, the sort of genius / madness of it. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also somewhat understandable when people grow weary of it. I was talking to my son recently, who's a newly admitted attorney. He's been an attorney for about 2 years. And I said something about, how I was just exhausted after a number of trials I'd had. And I said, yeah, I'm just, I'm not having fun right now. And he said, but Dad, you love your job. I said, well, I can love something and not be having fun at it. You know, like I love my job, but it's not always fun. Like like I love sex, but if I did it for 14 hours a day, 9 days in a row, I'd need a nap, or I'd be a little tired of it. Yeah. So, you know, we have a love for the work we do, hopefully. We have a passion for the work we do. We have a dedication to it. And certainly we've all sacrificed years and years of our most potent, vibrant years, our 20s, our 30s, building careers, building an educational skill set. So we love and are devoted to this thing, but it's often antagonistic to the other beautiful things in life.
In your book, you have a lot of insights into people's, I guess, I don't know, I call them habits, and habits that are probably detrimental to long-term relationships. And we were talking yesterday, and where we were recording some other podcasts about, the habits that we pick up through life to deal with stress and to soothe the stress. And I'm stealing that from a friend, that word soothing. And we were talking, it's like one of my habits that I think it's probably not good for me is just to get home when I'm really, really stressed and tired, mentally exhausted, and just lay on the couch and just like scroll through YouTube instead of going for like a walk with my dog or my girlfriend or like something like that makes me happy. I do something that just makes me more tired, anxious probably, and doesn't give me anything in life. Have you picked up any habits that surgeons or maybe some of our interventional cardiologists, interventional radiologist friends to listen to also have picked up that are detrimental to marriage, that are specific to what we do?
Yeah. I actually had a client who was a electrophysiologist. They worked in pacemakers and things like that. And I've represented a number of specifically vascular surgeons, and I've represented a lot of oncological. I had like a whole run with Memorial Sloan Kettering, because what happens in this profession is like you represent one cardiologist, and all of a sudden for like 3-4 years, you've got a bunch of cardiologists, because people talk to each other, and they go, oh, you got to hire my guy. He was great. Or you got to hire the guy my wife hired. He was great. And he killed me. So like, that's how I got my first surgeon, is I represented his wife, and I guess he was talking to a friend. And when I said to the guy, oh, how'd you get my name? He goes, well, I'm not supposed to tell you. And I said, well, that's weird. And he said, no, you represented this guy's wife, one of my colleagues' wives. And he said, yeah, don't hire the guy I used, hire the guy my wife used. The humor of that is I actually ended up representing representing his friend, who was a fellow surgeon. And he kept saying to me, like, oh yeah, my friend was saying that. And I said, by the way, let him know, like, it was never personal. Like, if he'd come to my office 15 minutes before his wife, I'd have been arguing his side of the case. Like, but yeah, I mean, look, I think what you're touching on there is important stuff. So first of all, like how we self-soothe, and I like that word too. I like the word soothing, because I think we are, look, we're as a man, we're hesitant to be like self-care day, but like the truth is, like there's value to realizing that we all have a child in us. We all are human. We all want to be soothed. We all want to relax. Like I have very successful friends in very high performance, C-suite executives who play Call of Duty on their Xbox, and these are grown men in their 40s and 50s, but this is very soothing for them. It's mindless. I have friends who, like I like to play blackjack when I go to Las Vegas. I don't do it very often, but when I do, I love to play, because it's kind of mindless. It's meditative, it's a thing you can just sort of do, and you don't have to think too much, and you only have to add a certain amount, so I think it's good to have things that allow you to self-soothe. But the interesting question is, why, when you talk about like scrolling through on YouTube and what you're doing, well, first of all, YouTube's got the algorithm, and that algorithm actually knows you really well, right? Like I have to tell you, YouTube, I love going through YouTube because it just seems to know what I'm into, in a way that I don't even know many romantic partners do, because they don't have full access to my cookies the way that YouTube does. They haven't done a data dive through all of my metadata, thank God. So, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, like, it has access to very private information and can give you what you want, right? So I don't fault anybody for saying I want to be given what I want. And I also think in your profession and related professions, it's a tremendous amount of interaction you have with other people every day. Like you have a social job. People don't think of what physicians and surgeons do as social, particularly surgeons, because you have this image of just the guy scrubbing in and walking in, and it's like, okay, well, this is very solitary, and I'm just putting on my performance here, and then I walk out, and that's it. But really think of how many people you have to interact with in a day at work, right? Not just following up, not just consultations, but just day-to-day interactions with colleagues, with all of the various people who work within the context of a hospital or a physician's office. So when you have downtime, sometimes you may just not want to be social. You just want to be quiet. You don't want to be spoken to. You don't want anyone to try to pick your brain. I jokingly say, like, I would love someone to just want me for my body. I think I'm past the time. But because most of the time people want my mind. People want to hear what I have to say. And in my free time, when someone goes, oh, you're a divorce lawyer? Oh my God, I have a friend who got divorced. And I'm like, are you seriously going to talk to me about divorce right now? Like this, it really is the equivalent of me saying to you guys, by the way, while I have you here, can you look at this mole? It's like, okay, A, not my area. B, really? Like right now, this is my free time. You want to do that? That's like the last thing I want. So I would think that in a ideal situation, your romantic partner would know. And remember, our romantic partners can't hear what we don't say. But it's important that they understand this is not a rejection of them. This is not, I don't want to go for a walk with you. This is, right now, I don't really know that I want to talk and interact, because that's all I've been doing is talking and interacting. And so if I could walk silently with you, or if I could, and again, remember, our professions are professions that by definition, people come to you to solve a problem. That's it. Like our job's the same job. You're here to solve a problem. I'm here to solve a problem. Your problems have to do with, vascular disease. My problems have to do with people's marriage and family situation. But we're here to solve problems. So when I'm hearing anything from anyone, even a love of my life, when she says to me like, oh yeah, this happened with my sister, my brain immediately goes to the mode of, okay, well, what could she do? And what might be the root cause of that? And, how could she address it? And what are the side effects and potential second order effects of what, because you can't do that 5 days a week all day and then just turn it off, because, it's after 5 p.m. on Friday. Now my brain, it'll turn it off and it'll work differently now. So sometimes I think that YouTube scrolling, that playing video games, that doing jujitsu or going to the gym, that antisocial, disconnected thing, sometimes it's a way to transition from the constant need, constant social interaction, constant problem solving into a different mode of being. But again, with the way our work weeks are structured, it's hard to do, because it's like, I always tell people when I go on vacation, it takes me the first 2 days just to calm down. And then it takes me like the last 2 days to get myself I start the tension of, okay, when I get back, I've got this to do. So basically, if I go away for a week, I got like 3 days. I got 3 days where I'm actually vacationing. And I think it's the same thing for all of us. When you get home from work, you don't immediately turn work off. You don't immediately stop thinking about it. So I think that's another thing we have to be honest with ourselves about, forgiving of ourselves about, and also we have to find ways to share it with our partner and have our partner understand. And that's why I was saying when physicians marry physicians or surgeons marry surgeons, it's sometimes a perfect storm, because although there's more understanding, like this person understands how you might be feeling and they're feeling in a similar way. So it's like two stressed, high pressure people. It's two high pressure systems moving into the same thing. That's challenging sometimes. But again, the barefoot in the park, like physician, surgeon married to a yoga teacher, married to a school teacher, they don't understand what you're dealing with and what you're going through. So again, there's no right answer. It's just a question of like, which set of problems do you want to have?
One thing that was very kind of eye-opening for me in this last year was the realization that in this thing that you put it very nicely, this you're an artist combined with a mathematician, and this dichotomy that we live in, that we choose to follow, is one that is essentially propelled by selfishness, right? The intention to grow, the intention to gain power, the intention to be the best at the best in a highly competitive market where you are taking tests to prove yourself, where you're proving yourself in patient care. And then you get to one place and then residency isn't enough. So then you have to do a fellowship, and fellowship isn't enough to do a sub-fellowship. And I feel that marriage and that became almost like a complementary need that I had in a very selfish way. And I say this because the moment that I realized, that and I've told this to my wife, so I don't really care that she listens to this again, but I said, I think I married you. It still being selfish, right? Like I wasn't giving myself to you. I was essentially finding what you could do for me in this construction of power. And the one moment when everything changed is when we had our kid, and our baby is now going to be a year old. And I remember probably within the first couple of weeks of being home and just essentially being with this beautiful creature that can't talk, but is present with you, that would just open their little eyes and look at you. And I felt like there was this just absolutely odd, out of left field change that gave me the absolute perspective and say, wow, I don't necessarily think all this other shit that I've been doing matters at this point, at least. And I don't know if that changes as they grow up, probably. But right now, I'm in a mode where I don't care that my career necessarily has this trajectory that I always thought it should have. But here's the funny part, and the fucked up part is the same for the marriage, right? Because everything in me right now is about protecting and about gathering and giving this one beautiful entity in our lives everything that I can. And there's somewhat of a sacrifice, I think, of what this other selfish project was, which was called marriage, right? But it then puts into perspective, holy shit, we really have to work for this, right? Because I can see how easy this could derail, given the set of circumstances that has led us to this. And I come home and all I want us to do is, I want to bust that door open and hug my baby. Yeah. And my wife is the one giving him to me, right? And I can see her smile seeing that, but at the same time, I always, I go and I hug her too. Yeah. But I don't, how fucked up, James?
See, I have to tell you, I think that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. And I think it really is. And I think it's beautiful. And I think it bodes so well for your future, because the things you're saying, and I'm further down the path. Like I was a cautionary tale as a professional, because my children were born, my youngest child, who's now 24, was born when I was finishing law school. And I was like, success was plan A and there was no plan B. Like I had no safety net. It was get rich or die trying. Like that was it. Like I got to pass the bar. I got to start a firm. I got to make that firm successful. And that was the priority. And as you were saying what you were saying, I thought to myself, wow, I remember that. Like I remember coming home from a long day at work. And I remember very often, like I'd try to get home before my oldest was asleep.
Yeah. Yep.
But he would sometimes be asleep. And I used to go into his room and I would just smell him. Mm-hmm. Like I would just smell, he smelled like the baby shampoo and like the little kid toothpaste that they use. And I would remember, sometimes I would just lay there and like feel his breath. I would just sort of hug him. He was asleep. I didn't want to wake him up, but I would just lay there and I'd be in my suit. I have this image in my head. I remember it so vividly. And I remember I sometimes felt something so profound, I almost wanted to weep.
Correct.
It was a feeling of like, oh my God, I love this thing so much. Like, and I want to do such a good job. I want to protect and provide, and I want to be a good father. And I also want to be here and not miss all of it. But I also have all of these things I want to do and need to do so that I can provide and protect and be a good provider and good parent. But I'm also, in order to do those things, going to miss so much of what's going on. And I just remember feeling so conflicted. But, you know, what you'll see, because you're early in the parenting journey, is that what I learned probably later than I should have. And that is that your children are an amazing wake-up call. In the sense that, yes, they need and want a lot of things. Like, kids are expensive. Like, when, you know, like, you could have a Ferrari or a kid, you know, and a kid's way more expensive than a Ferrari. You just pay over a longer period. The loan is amortized, you know. But I have to tell you, like, they just want you. Like, they just want your time. They just love you. Like, you know, mom and dad, like, is the name of God on the lips of children. Like, they just love you, especially when they're that little. And it's finite. Like, it's going to end. I mean, there was a time where my sons, you know, you could say to them, like, hey, do you want to go to the circus with mommy, or do you want to, like, watch me shave? And they would be like, oh my God, I want to watch you. So, like, they would do anything with me. You want to go to Home Depot with me? Oh my God, yes. Like, and then one day when they're like in middle school or high school, you go, hey guys, you want to go to the movies? And they're like, yeah, no, I was going to sit in a room with a bunch of my friends and all look at our phones. And you're like, oh, well, we could go like get pizza, and then we could, like, I'm going to take the whole day off, and we could get something to eat, and we could do, you know, we can go to Dave and Buster's and play video games. And they're like, yeah, no, we were going to actually hang out at the convenience store and see if girls walk by. And you're like, wow, like, this is over. I missed it, you know? So, but one of the things you said that I want to push back on a little bit is the idea that marriage is selfish, right? Like, that marriage, as you viewed it, or as perhaps it fit into the order of your life, right? Into the cabinet of your life. It was there for a selfish reason. I think, you know, people love throwing around the word narcissist, right? Like, that's one of the new buzzwords, like gaslight, narcissist. These are like trauma. These are the three words that, like, everybody's using now. I don't know if, like, Oprah must have used them at some point. Now everybody's just friggin' using them. But it's like the lexicon now. Every single client comes in and says he's a narcissist. He gaslights me. Okay. Yeah. And then I do a little deeper of a dive and go, well, what do you mean? And so most of the time when people refer to a narcissist, they're referring to a person who's selfish. And sometimes when people are referring to someone who's selfish, they're actually just referring to someone who's self-interested. Because there's a difference between being selfish and being self-interested. And I don't think anybody gets married that isn't in part doing it for a self-interested reason. Like, why would you marry someone for a completely selfless reason? I mean, I think at best, marriage is a symbiosis. You know, marriage is mutual benefit and mutual sacrifice. You know, we're giving and we're getting. And there's a mutuality of consideration, to put it in lawyer terms.
Mutual self-interest.
Yeah, but right? I can relate, because, like, when we were interviewing for general surgery residency, I remember I went to New York, to a place there, and the program director said, you know, more people are, like, you know, attacked by or like, it is more common to be attacked by sharks than to be a surgeon. You guys are so special. And then during the whole process, you kind of, like, have this thing that because you exert yourself to such a degree, you know, you are special. And, you know, it's kind of a mind fuck. The sleep deprivation, you know, I always felt that if I gave less than 100%, I was a failure. Like, there was, like, the only acceptable, you know, result was 100% at all times.
Yeah, and there are aspects of your career where if you hadn't given 100%, you wouldn't get to the next level.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get to the next place. I mean, medical school is a pie eating contest where the prize is more pie. Like, you know, you're just doing, you know, work really hard in med school. Why? So you can get the best grades, so you can get the best residency placement. Okay, now do the best in the residency so that you can get the best fellowship. Like, when does this stop?
I know.
You know, and the answer is, like, you keep pushing and pushing, and so you're constantly feeling like a failure. Because you're constantly feeling like, oh my God, if I mess up this hurdle, everything I've sacrificed was useless. So I gotta keep pushing. And that doesn't end the minute you're done with your education. I mean, then it becomes, how do I become assistant chief? How do I become chief? How do I move up in the ranks here? How do I get a better, class of patients or of a practice? How do I create a lifestyle that's going to fit better professionally? But again, so you're constantly competing with yourself and with others who are all among the elite as well, because they've all, met some of the same milestones as you. And then you go home and you're just a person. You're just a person who's got to take out the garbage and who somebody's got to wash their underwear. And like, you're just a person, and that's, I think, challenging for people too. It's challenging to be the kind of person who people are willing to pay both of you and me just to talk to them. Like, think about that. Like, we can get paid just to tell people our perspective on something they're dealing with, how we might solve their problem. I mean, you have an additional layer where you have something in your brain and something you can do with your hands. I don't need the hands. I just have the brain to offer. So you guys have an even higher layer. But then you go home and, your kid just wants you to read them a story. Your spouse just wants to tell you about their stupid day, and you're sitting here going, listen, all day people have been throwing problems at me. And those problems are things like they're things that could cause them to die if handled poorly. Yeah. And now I'm supposed to seem interested in what's going on with your fucking cousin? Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I can't do that imitation. Like, I have a couple of hours free right now, and you're telling me about what's going on with your cousin, and I'm sitting here going, okay, we got to land this plane. Like, where is this story going? But the truth is, again, you have the right to feel that way. Your spouse also has the right to want to be able to share things with you about their stupid cousin, so we have to find a way, and this is the practice I've tried with my own life, to not hear it as a criticism and not hear it defensively when I'm not meeting the needs of this other person. Because look, they're here selfishly too. Like, your spouse has selfish intentions. I don't mean that negatively. I would say self-interested instead of selfish. Like, I think, your spouse married you for, I hope, self-interested reasons. That she was like, oh, this is a person who's going to give me a good life and be a good companion that'll give me pleasure, and that'll give me some security. Like, these are the reasons we marry. I hope you didn't go, well, I guess I'm ready to bite the bullet and marry this person. Like, I hope you didn't say that when you chose your spouse. I hope it was like, oh, yeah, like, I'm going to get a lot out of this, and I'm going to give some things to it as well, So I really think, though, that one of the things I talk about in the book, and I've talked about in some of my other, media stuff, is that there are better ways. And it would be great if our spouses and partners, tried to understand us a little better. But again, they can't hear what we don't say. And the way that they might parse it to us, I think, would have value if they parsed it differently. The example I frequently give, and I apologize if you've heard it before, is, in my profession, you're really supposed to look the part of a lawyer. Like, you're supposed to look like a Perry Mason, or, you're supposed to have that clean cut, like Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men. You're supposed to wear like the nice suit and be clean shaven, short haircut. You don't have an earring. Like, you're supposed to fit a mold. You're dealing with a lot of elderly judges who they want you to look like what they imagine a lawyer should look like. And by the way, clients want you to look like what a lawyer looks like. And so part of that was being clean shaven. This is the weekend now, so I'm not clean shaven today. But I have a thick beard that grows in very fast, and it's dark. So I have to shave every day during the week in order to play the lawyer role, So on the weekends, I like to not shave, because it's like, give my face a break, and it's just nice to not have to shave. And I remember I was dating a woman that she had very sensitive skin, and every time I would like kiss her or kiss her neck or kiss her cheek, she would, if I wasn't freshly shaven, she would be like, oh God, your face is so scratchy. And I remember it would upset me so much. I sometimes wouldn't say anything, but like in my heart, I would think, really? Like, you know what? Maybe I just shouldn't kiss you then. Like I got to shave all week. I can't have 2 days where I don't have to drag a razor across my face. Like, I'm kissing you. Like, that's a nice thing to do. You don't have to complain about the fact that I'm giving you, some kind of, I'm upsetting your delicate skin. Really? Like, come on, And it wasn't the best way to express that to me, you know? And of course, not surprisingly, it didn't work out with that woman. But the next woman I dated had the exact same issue. But the way that she handled it, I think, was genius. And I learned a lot from it. And that is, when I would, you know, if she'd spend the night on Sunday night and I would shave Monday morning, she would come in and she'd kiss me after I'd shaved, and she'd go, "Oh God, I love it. I love when your skin is like freshly shaven. It's like so sexy. You're like Don Draper in Mad Men, you know?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." She's like, "Oh my God, it's so hot. Like I love like the feel of like your freshly, you know, shaved face on my neck." And I would have shaved 3 times a day. Like I was like, okay. And I actually would like shave on the weekends when I was going to see her, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah," you know, I'd kiss her and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I just shaved," and she'd be like, "I noticed," you know, dude. How easy is that?
Yeah.
How easy is that? Like, so you accomplish the same thing, right? Which is you're trying to motivate, or you're trying to accomplish the same thing. Get me to shave so I don't irritate your skin. And by the way, you have a right to not want your skin to be irritated. But there's a way to do that that's going to make me feel good about it. And there's a way to do it that's going to make me feel defensive about it. So I think that we're all being self-interested in a marriage. Otherwise, what's the point? If you're marrying someone out of a, like, this is your duty to marry this person, even though it's not in your interests, like, God help you. Yeah. You know, like, you're both there for some self-interested reasons. So why not identify clearly what they are for yourself and for your partner, and try to serve them as best you can? Because that death spiral that relationships get into, you know, where it's like, well, why should I, you know, bring her home flowers? When's the last time that she, you know, just like initiated sex, you know, just for the hell of it, you know? Well, and meanwhile, she's thinking, why the hell should I initiate sex with him? He hasn't bought me flowers in 6 months. And now we're in a death spiral where we're just going to get worse, and everyone's just going to be equally miserable because the other person failed to make them happy. But that can go the other way too, you know, where it's like you just start extending kindness to your partner and affection to your partner, the way that you did when you were trying to close the deal when you were dating this person. And maybe ideally that inspires in your partner a desire to do the same. And then that makes it easier and more desirable for you to want to meet their needs. So again, listen, physicians, surgeons, you're problem solvers. By nature, you're problem solvers. Like, so look at the underlying problem. I always tell people, when you're thinking about getting married, ask yourself, what is the problem to which marriage is a solution? Because anytime you use any technology, you should be asking yourself, what is the problem to which this technology is a solution? Do I have that problem? How does it solve that problem? And what second order effects, what new problems might it create in solving this other problem? Because if you ask those kinds of questions, I think you'll view marriage and relationship differently.
Now, James, we've kind of superficially discussed this book. I want to say 2019. You mentioned.
Yep,
is
that's
when
when it came out.
This book called "If You're in My Office, It's Already Too Late: A Divorce Lawyer's Guide to Staying Together." That's the title of your book, right?
Correct.
What, if you don't mind, leads you to write this? Because in a way, here's what I'm hearing from you, is you could probably have a phenomenal career in marriage counseling and get away from the work that goes into breaking it up or destroying it or amicably as possibly ending it. So what happened that you decided, hey guys, it's time for me to write something from all the shit I've learned and hopefully get you to not come to me. But at the same way, that's somewhat self-destructive for your own career. And does that mean that you need to get yourself on a path of counseling and getting people to stay together? What's the balance in that change?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I was actually a psychology major as an undergraduate. I did my master's degree and was working on my PhD, and I was interested in becoming a therapist. And then it became very clear to me that the best therapists listen more than they talk. And I talk more than I listen. Like I'm chatty, if you haven't figured that out. And so I also, look, we all contain multitudes, right? So I was a debater from high school on. I love extemporaneous speaking. I love the performance aspect of being on trial. I love the strategic chess match that is litigation, divorce litigation. And I love the human element that is divorce litigation. So I really feel like I'm in a profession that hit all the marks for me. Like, I love my work. I really do. I love it. I again, like sex, you know, I love it, but if I did it 14 hours a day, I'd get tired. Like, I absolutely love my job. And at the time I wrote the book, I had been working just as a divorce litigator for 20 years. And or a little less than 20 years at that point. And I was listening to a podcast where Stephen King was being interviewed. And I'm a voracious reader. And I sometimes, when I'm on vacation, I like to read really fluffy stuff like Stephen King or a Jack Reacher novel, like the junk food equivalent of reading. And Stephen King was talking about how he's such a prolific writer. And they said, how do you put out 2-3 books a year? And he said, well, it's really not that hard. If you write a page a day, in a year, you have a book. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Like, I wonder if I could do that. Maybe I'll write a book. Like, it might be a fun thing. I get up at 4 a.m. every day. It might be like a fun meditative thing to like a half an hour in the morning before I work out or whatever I would write. And I started to think about, well, what could I write? You know, and I thought to myself, just as in your profession, listen, you know, by the time I'm on the table, there's a lot of stuff I could have done to not be on your table. You know, like, by the time, you know, I have, you know, 100%, you know, obstruction of the left anterior descending, you know, like there's a lot I could have done to not have that happen, you know, so I would be better to have this information as early as possible. Like, if you could tell me while I was a young 20-something, hey, here's how to have a healthy heart when you're 50. Here's how to have a healthy heart when you're 70. You know, here's the things you can start doing now, these little things you can do now. Well, it was the same thing for me. I just went, look, all of these people, by the time they're in my office, they're so far gone. Like, they're so far. So what can I learn, or what can I teach someone about, you know, preventative maintenance? What can I teach someone, like, by looking at how things break? How can we learn about how to keep them together? And so I started thinking about, what are the things that I just hear over and over again? And see, so much of our culture is opinion, like it's speculation, you know? Whereas for me, it's like, listen, I'm just telling you what the people sitting at the chair, I've facilitated the demise of thousands of marriages at this point. You know, and I look at it like I'm there to bury what's dead. Like, I don't make it rain. I sell the umbrella. Like, I don't, you know, you're not out there shoving cheeseburgers down people's throats. Like, you're dealing with the repercussions of people's bad choices. Or sometimes it's just God says, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and this person has, you know, an issue that through no fault of their own, the healthiest person in the world, they follow all the right habits. So I think for me, once I started using that muscle, it actually made a lot of sense for me, but I have no desire to leave my profession at this point, and do this full time. Like, this is a side hobby. I won't even call it a side hustle because it's not particularly lucrative. But it's emotionally lucrative. I think it's rewarding in the sense that I get to meet a lot of people who are people I admire and who are interesting people, and people whose struggles are the same as mine, you know. And I also sometimes get to share my experience or observation, whether it's personal or professional, with people in a way that I hope is going to help them in some fashion stay on a path that may prevent them from ending up in my office or one like it. So, but yeah, it's a human thing. I mean, guys, look, we're all intelligent men. We wouldn't be in the professions we're in. We wouldn't be as successful as we are in the professions we're in if we weren't intelligent men. But let's be honest. Like, I can tell you this unequivocally. If we were just in it for the money, we'd all just be in finance. Like, my wealthiest clients are in finance, all of them. Like, I have entered people in entertainment, and they're worth, 5-10 million. You'd know them if you saw them on the street. You might ask for their autograph. But my clients in finance, they're worth $7 billion, $8 billion, $400 million. You know, so we're not in it for the money. We're not just in it. Like, we have lucrative professions. You know what? I had to sacrifice my entire 20s and most of my 30s to get where I am in my life. So I don't apologize for my fee. But I will say that we're clearly not just in these professions for the money, because if we were, we'd just be in finance. We're intelligent enough to be in finance if we wanted to be. So we're doing this for some reason because we like people and we like helping people. That may not always be readily apparent because sometimes I think we all get exhausted and we are in professions that feed our narcissism maybe a little bit, right? Like to be successful in these professions or even in the education required for these professions, you have to be self-interested. You have to push yourself. You have to believe in yourself. And it's pretty easy to then have a lot of people also applauding you and believing in you and bowing down to you in their own ways. When your time, I still sometimes am shocked when I hear my administrative staff being like, well, Mr. Sexton's not available at that time. And I'm like, listen to that, I'm Mr. Sexton, like there's still like a sense of like, well, I'm kind of somebody, but we're also just human, and it's really, really hard to remember how to find that balance. Like that little boy or girl, that little 1-year-old that you have at home, you're just dad. Like you're just dad, and it's a great thing to be. It's an amazing thing to be, and if you do it right, I'm very blessed. I have 2 sons, ages 24 and 27, and I did not in any way push them to go into the law. And one is a successful lawyer and the other is in law school. And it was not because I pushed it in any way. I said to them, find something you love. Do something you love. I have clients who are plumbers who make a lot more money than some of my physician clients, especially after managed care. But I have a lot of, I didn't push them, but I think they saw how much passion I have for what I do and how much I love it. And I think that helped influence and one of them, is in law school, so it's a little too soon to tell. And the one who's an attorney is a successful attorney and he loves it. And what an amazing thing to have that little boy who I used to cuddle up next to and smell the, Johnson's baby shampoo on his hair, to now meet him at a restaurant in the city when he's wearing his tie and just got out of court and I just got out of court and I'm wearing my tie, and he sits there and tells me about the motion to suppress that he filed today on it. And I just look at him and think like, I taught you that the cow says moo, and now a whole bunch of stuff I don't know, and you're a lawyer, you're your own person, and and maybe I'm getting older and getting nostalgic, but I'm starting to realize that look, we're important. I think the work we do is important. I think the work you do is important. You've changed people's lives in your work, and I've changed people's lives in my work, and that's a beautiful thing, and it's a humbling thing. But we're not that important. Like if you left your profession tomorrow, it's not like people will be like, well, where am I ever going to find a vascular surgeon? There's a lot of us. There's a lot of you. Yeah. It's not like people would stay married if I quit my job tomorrow, or they couldn't find another divorce lawyer. So I think it's all about just finding that balance, and finding, at the risk of making a pun of the name, finding a flow, finding a way to sort of flow between self-interest and sacrifice, to find a flow between the passion and devotion to our mission, our purpose, our work, and also to being kind to ourselves and being kind to the people in our lives who are lovely enough to tolerate the genius and madness of us,
Well, I'll tell you this. I don't think that you need to quit your job as a lawyer, and I hope you don't, because it sounds by all accounts that you are really good at it. But I think that there is a responsibility that comes with this power that you've been given. Your word is very strong. Your message is incredibly strong. It resonates with us. So the pursuit for advocacy and influence as a message of mending for a lot of us out there, I think is going to be important. I congratulate you on this, and it took a few years for it to viralize, if you may. But I hope that it viralizes even more so, and I hope that you get even more channels by which you can touch more lives, because I do believe that this message is incredibly important. And I hope. Thank
you. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate having the chance to talk to you both. And I really think there's tremendous value in what you're doing. I think speaking so candidly to a community of people who, although diverse, share a lot of the same challenges and struggles. I've always thought I like watching boxing and mixed martial arts. I've always enjoyed that. And at the end of the fight, when the two people who've just spent the entire time beating the crap out of each other, when they hug, like, it always gets me. Yeah. Because there's something so beautiful about the fact that these two people have just tried to beat the crap out of each other, for the last however many rounds, but that they have more in common than anyone else in that arena. Like, there's thousands of people watching, and those two people have the most in common because they both sacrificed and they both dieted and they both trained so hard and they both just spent the last however long getting the shit beat out of them by the other. And so they have so much in common, and we spend so much time in our respective professions, mine being directly adverse, with opposing counsel, yours in being competitive with your colleagues, and competitive with yourself in the desire to raise up your own status as a professional. And there's something really beautiful about what you're doing in that you're trying to sort of candidly, bluntly, honestly, openly, not in the performative Instagram advertisement, 100 best doctors in blah, blah, blah way that we all advertise ourselves, which we have to do. I get it. We have to do that for our professions. But there's something wonderful about being vulnerable and honest about where you're struggling as a father, as a husband, as a professional, as an employer, as an employee. That I just think if more professions reached out to their colleagues, it's the two fighters in the ring hugging each other, Yeah. And so I applaud both of you for doing something unique here. In a world where there's just so much out there and so many people talking into microphones that don't have anything to say, I think you all have a lot to say. And I think it's great that you're doing it because you're doing your colleagues and your community and their spouses and their employees and their colleagues and partners in their practices. Like you're giving those people. So there are second order effects to all the things that you're doing that I think are really, really valuable too. So I hope you will also continue, as you've wished for me, continue in your profession because it sounds like you're both really good at it and you're both moving along in wonderful ways in it, but also continue to share this secondary message because I think it really has value and it moves everybody forward. So thank you for what you do and thank you for having me.
Well, it was great, James. Again, thank you. And
yeah, go buy the book, read it. Follow this guy. He's on a
just
curve.
You can get it on
greatness.
Audible. It's easier. Listen to me talk for 8.5 hours.
And you read it
Audible.
yourself.
Do you read your own book?
Yeah, he does.
I do. Yes, I do.
And you're very funny. You're very, very, very funny. So that I appreciate that.
The Audible book, people, it's Think It Out sells the book like 10 to 1 because people like listening to me talk for 8.5 hours, which I jokingly tell people is like 7.5 hours more than my ex-wife ever listened to me talk. So that's pretty good.
All right, James.
All right, buddy. Thank you very much.
See you guys.